Welcome to the Hórus Audiobook channel. Don't forget to subscribe for more fascinating content.
The full content is available on the website. Micrologus, zos vel thanatos.
Pathopsychology has birthed another Frankenstein. By idiocracies become hypocrisies, with their own environmental facades, to ornament the suppression and what they suppress, to excuse, shift blame from the old arch-vices, insatiable greed and furtive ferocity. Believe it or not, there is such a thing as wickedness. There is a third eye. To paraphrase, "Let not thy right eye seeth what the left seeth," would be a distinction without much difference, except for our willful blindness to all committed self-deceptions. They are seen and recorded by the inner eye. You may delude your foreconsciousness, but not what is far beneath. The main premise of religion is the demanding of complete acceptance by faith of some dogmatic thesis and conclusion. That as if explains the abstracts and mysteries of life, and as proof the assertion that their God or cause, as being so miraculous in his workings to be beyond human comprehension, to override your bafflement of all contradictions and incongruities. I admit nature accomplishes the impossible. Has she not created man? If you can so delude yourself and stomach this stuff, it partially works, which means that the poorest as-if conation is better than non-belief, and gives something, if only a shadowy postulation in death or a palliative by psychoparalysis in life. He speaks truthfully, and saith, "I know not, and I speak truthfully. I know not my omniscience." Hear now the saviors with their incredulous assertions, platitudinous, jittery, and frenetic asseverations, heaven and eternal life in exchange for belief in the atonement of the blood, or be damned. Such a wishful bellyful has never worked yet, or any other absurdities of iniquitous credulity. Stinks. Therefore, pray not direct to God, but to your own damned self, by sacrifice and service to man. It is the only correct manner of prayer, and none so poor that they cannot so give. All other forms of prayer are abortive, merely a ritualistic appreciation. The only answering forces of good that I know originate from man, and the only force of evil that I know radiates from man also. If the evil thoughts of man were able to break through our protective auras, human life would end. All prayer dissipates without an intermediary or carrier. God's soul and the psycho-substantive seem to respond only through the mind by indirection and heterosuggestion. This is the secret way through many barriers. The mind is potent, still the deadliest weapon, or the reverse. I ask, what greater gift could any God give us? Only ourselves, as free individuals, not so much to hate and love as to excel ourselves. Psychology is now the equal of any other dogma, inasmuch as it demands the full acceptance of rigid conclusions from undefined qualities and premises. Psychology has no dominant thesis or definition of such fundamentals as consciousness, intelligence, thought, and purpose. We are aware that there are no exact or final definitions or conclusions of anything, but we are also aware that certain correct hypotheses, one such as regarding the ether, have rendered us certain other facts, and thus directly prove their thesis. The offer of such very shaky nominalism, which begins nowhere and ends in an excusing pathology, presents a worse gamble than any of any religion. Psychoism has no standard of morality, behaviorism, or normality with which it mainly deals, so must be based on the common mean, the average, an inelastic average at that. Thus, anything abnormal or subnormal could or might be patho. Shit. And when the common denominators are realized from the id of greed, then where are we? The zombie our level? Genius a madness? No. For civilization, there must be a more arbitrary ethical intelligent standard above the normalities, an ideal that is tactual, that is directly related to reality with its integral precisions determined by social motivation. Conventions, whether of morals or behavior, may be as wise as anything man has invented. Man ever aberrates, even his normalities, mainly to compensate for his deficiencies, and often finds there a shadow world that accepts and reflects the assured survival of his weaknesses. Words, 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 however used, whatever they symbolize, request, or tell, say more, showing in between the antics of all motives. Yes, word rendering offers the quickest of deaths to flabby ideas, and also the most poignant, suggestive, contagious, substitutive, and lasting means known to convey anything. Most deadly virus, most potent abcreation, and magic subtlety. Even your erasure has you believing. We are overstuffed with words, now a veritable systole and diastole of mind. Whether or not we correctly articulate, we suffer postprandial torpor. Neither universe nor man is complete, completing or dissolving, but only resurging and reindulging, existing forms reshaping to function new pleasures of flesh impacting flesh. At least, so I imagine, who loves fat women. Only man unveils, as a build-up for excuse, for courage, for some enactment or the exacting. We are a great company. None walk alone, but with a formidable host of familiars, however we may clothe, shut out, or prohibit. There is a veritable funeral procession of dead selves and loves always in attendance. The ugly ecstasies. The mass of mankind are fixed adolescents, sex-obsessed, and making of the thing a messy or obscene commonplace, a nephitic bathos from ill-used passions and emotions. Yet procreation is a mystery, but holds no greater mystery than breathing. Both are life initial and fundamental. Yes, the mystic union is now a mere dirty copulation. What stupidities, benign the assertion that anything was created related to all else. If things were entirely separate, complete, they would be static and quickly exhaust. Life, growth, change, into and out of things to all transmutations possible. All things serve each other, willingly or otherwise. Yet we live by every means a partitiveness, make our ignorance as permanent as possible, and nothing seems more lasting than a lie. Life is a potency, becoming selected indulgences, a path through the chaos we make. How soon, fearing, shocked, cry out for salvation and backslide to some old mothering or protectiveness. No escape. For to breathe the human smell, touch the Hurshit flesh, shall again adventure, must transgress. Compensating mechanisms often demand an antithesis to balance or fulfill, as with character and temperament, an ideal union being the masculine woman and the effeminate man. Words have lost their pristine power, now impressing as on a queechy surface. They become an ambiguous way of knowing and fourth-hand experiencing, because one's reactions to events can never be formed or apprised from another's. Queerly, most people believe what they read or hear, if written or spoken rigorously or as authoritatively. Yet human credulity has more of virtue than of absurdity. We are millions of yesterdays, and what appears autogenic is the work of unknown mediators who permit or not our acts by the mysterious chemistry of our believing.
Beauty alone reaches simplicity, because it is basic economy. Envy over-adorns, paints, ostentatiously clothes and transfers to mode. The naked figure is a more fluid and truthful beauty. Hence, to marry a face is often to marry a fiction. Our work and behavior is the truer portrait, the value we live and give by. When thought disassociates from the correspondences and gradations between contrasting things, these will reform abundantly with new correlatives as emotional content in our resultant process of rearrangements. Final representation is an asymmetrical balance. This seeing strangely is the level of our genius. Reasoning and its inferences are a screever's logic, and useless to put us in contact with reality, all reality being more abstract than actual, as a para-ideal we know of but cannot grasp. The nearest we attain to it is by a unison of all the senses that appreciates by personal sentiment, can, by suitable emotional channeling, be affective and associate and express any nuances and abstracts which cannot be defined in thought, an unplanned latent portraying, as in nature. All religion is suffering, sufferance. Prayer is a false separation. Immanence is always here. Only the refrangible comes through, a filtrated quasi-reality, not the thing itself. The noumenon of mind is seemingly susceptible only by partitiveness as phenomenal form. Thus all our awareness is reflected, partitive, and with a linear I as consciousness, and so motivates our faculties into actuations. But over and above this, we have that queer feeling which extends and attempts to get behind and rationalize the unclarifiable. But we never do, being dimensionally chained and bed companion to our Mrs. God or misused id. There is nothing self-potential in creation, including our Creator. The frowsy hermaphrodites are unsurviving, improvised transients. The division of self from self was a diversity for variety, and soon all animation becomes presence, naotic and numerous. Therefore, it is better to speak of the gods than of a singular. Belief is a sustenance, desire acquisitive, and will energizes and maintains. Their close unison gives ability and the measure of our sincerity, creative when spontaneous. First the suppressions to create the tension, then the dramatic release. One damned thing after another. Life and death is an entering and leaving of different dream worlds, and reality is where we find or make it. Our fictualism and factualism are equally false or true. We believe what we desire to believe, usually a disguised motivation of egotism, or to dream compensations, our poor panacea for the irreducible id plus I. The frequency of time we relate is our measure of space, and works inversely. Apperception, digestion, and gestation are slow. To believe and accept everything, all contradictions, even unto the most incredulous, to believe the Immaculate Conception with cheap salvation, and the whole shoot of such religions, is an impossible ideal. Belief must be limited, to have depth and meaning. No, there is rumination, regurgitation, final vomiting, not yet the limitless stomach. The only quick change artistry we perform is the taking off and putting on again of some protectiveness, deceit, or disguise. Refusing reality, we must make one and show off. Over-exuberance is a satisfaction and the beginning of rococo and decay. Too much freedom overruns itself, flops, and turns to vicious disease or trivia. All teaching should be confined to ways of learning and techniques. We live inside churches and schools too long. Our efforts are mainly to re-experience, to make probable and permanent those things we like and desire most, whereas mind and body reshapes for other powers to serve their purpose first. A life of pleasure is impossible. All promiscuity is now filthy. So few understand pleasuring by innocent unchastities. The unhealthy conscience forces forgetfulness, the essential smothering of your anti-sociability to appear conventionally possible. Our next incarnation is always a revival, to extend, to envelop something, and a greater shutting out. Survival by differential revival, crediting and repaying to re-borrow. Pledged we are. The anxiety of the ultra-modern is of being outmoded by the next idiom, usually a revival or variation of a forgotten one, as something new. Praise or blame deceives, and would make us inferior, when, as confirming our false and true values, we should only be influenced from a personal and innermost feeling of appurtenance over and above such things, to make our great simplicity to equal all. To walk the safest way of least resistance, we cheaply familiarize ourselves and become insensitive, sterile, so to the unfamiliar and all jungles. To follow the bellwether is still the most universal and successful gospel. It is the empirical, sometimes accidental, meaning and beauty of nature, as well as the overlooked obvious that art portrays. To become oblique is one answer, but our minds have heaped up clichés, self-coined, borrowed, or inherited, mostly spurious. So stultified, not by limits of language, nor so tongue-tied, we fail through falsities and half-believings, fears bred of cramped growth, obedience to uninspired patterning, and lose our impassioned creativeness by accepting easy conventions, idioms, and shoddy imitations. Those of real ability count their consummations as still lacking, hence they are always learning. We hate and love ourselves only through others. Heaven help us, looking only for our likenesses. We exhibit inferiority and pretension when we congratulate ourselves as lacking the defects of others. So, rightly or wrongly, I think this.
What was once free, casual, and formless seeks arbitrary laws, precipitated into time and dimensional form with definite functional purpose and direction, about which we can only guess, to realize all probabilities within definite limits that so far are unlimited. These extend and allow formative desire through necessity to realize by excreative means. How much or how little is bound up in a mystic belief of ourselves, we only know as possible potency. In our relation to cosmos, if significance is measured by our increative ability, then we are of no greater worth than the amoeba. Nature permits no interrogation. Our techniques merely imitate, and only when so allowed. The function and purpose of life almost seems an experiment in genius, a chosen few at one time. Our early acceptance of things as they are, as dominant reality, later becomes overshadowed by doubt, and we conclude that evil is real, potent, and contra to almightiness. But lest we forget, there was no evil until man's advent, and thereby a certain madness is seeking a rational explanation of life. Things totally without knowledge seem to function perfectly, and are alone beyond good and evil. Knowledge precludes the acceptance of all things. The beginning of knowledge is not the discovery of our own ignorance, but the acceptance of all. An equation always equal becomes its own good and evil. And those born of great ability also have a profound ignorance of how they accomplish and learn what explanation they can give. How do they know what they know? Ability is an endowment from our past selves. The infinite cosmos, the Milky Way, and all therein manifest as from organism, and so all things continue. There are no alternatives or different derivatives. So without truth are such assertions, that we did not originate ourselves of our own free will or otherwise. Our amnesia covers so much, all our early history and potentials, now latent, unknown yet, what were unities, truth, freedom, etc., are now separate, untrue,
powerless or appear diversely, all vice versas. But the eternal, ever-varying flux of our media relatability is as the ebb and flow of our capacity towards greater affinity to all possibilities within the ever-omnipresent mind as manifest flesh. Where there is life, there is a degree of consciousness, however shadowy, with all its interrelating portences. When the uniform homogeneity of matter breaks or divides, activity manifests as multiples, and individual modifications begin. Concurrently, a subtle superfetation occurs, which forms our media for ubiquity minds and becomes our ego, then soul. We are always a functional throwback, the articulation of past latencies. The complex development of body becomes a more elastic medium for ego, mind, and soul to work through. The purpose of life appears as the conversation of matter, from the collective uniform, stinking lump, into a specialized separateness, e.g., a diversity of individuals. Hence, there is no universal brotherhood based on equality, just the reverse. Whatever our claims concerning interrelatedness, this is governed not only by heritage, but also by aptitude. Ability indeed has to be deserved the hard way, the way of techniques and effort. The body is the puppet of the mind. We begin as automatic, becoming as autonomous. A transference. The puppet becomes the showman. All our integrations stem from our intro-extrovertive ability, a mental breathing, give, take, and remake.
The Book of Pleasure, Self-Love, The Psychology of Ecstasy, Austin Osman Spare.
Introduction. The work of art we love is that which, like the sentence of Meredith's Mrs. Mountstuart, has an outline in vagueness and is flung out to be apprehended, not dissected. Explanations, labels, we rightly distrust, but after our first delight, it is interesting to examine the aims and methods of the artist and to appreciate the thoughts behind them. With his first book of drawings, the chaotic and wonderful Earth Inferno, 1905, Austin Osman Spare gave us explanations which, if they did not materially add to our delight in the vitality of the designs, could hardly be dissociated from them, and did increase our interest in their creator's personality. His second book, A Book of Satyrs, 1907, relied on pictorial statement, and, though an advance in technique was apparent and the conception more mature, this work was not so wholly satisfactory as the first. Since the publication of these books, Spare's work has progressed. The best qualities of each have been merged and added to, with the result that such drawings as the Death Posture, frontispiece, have been produced. In this connection, it may not be out of place to quote from my notes on one of the more important of his later exhibitions, that at the Bailey Gallery, Bruton Street, London, at the end of 1911. Quote, "The man who would give form to our vague thoughts and who would suggest and symbolize abstract ideas for us pictorially must come to his task with a very complete technical equipment or invite disaster at the outset. And if on looking at some of these pencil drawings we are inclined to resent so reckless a prodigality of invention in what seems at first so incoherent a statement, we should look at the pen and ink drawing, The Psychology of Ecstasy, and there see a work completed. A work from which the superfluous eliminated, there emerges a vitality so controlled and concentrated that satisfies us at once, even though we may be baffled by the meaning, which on more intimate acquaintance will give up some of its secrets. Return now to the majority of the drawings, and should we not be glad that we are thus permitted to watch the birth of pictorial ideas? Should we not revel in these forms springing from forms, these lines leaping like flames upon the paper? We may reproach Spare with one thing. He has given us too much, and we have been unable to digest it. Now he comes to our aid with this magic book, the drawings in which may be taken as explanations of his text, his creed, and while some may be chiefly interested in this revelation of the workings of the artist's mind, others, by this very revelation, may see themselves more clearly as they are, and indeed may be tempted to follow his path to a more joyous life, to that pleasure, self-love, which gives the title to the book, and which may be interpreted as the ecstasy of complete self-realization. I will add a word of thanks to the author-artist for his kindness in giving me the opportunity of writing this short note, and with the hope that the book may bring an increased measure of appreciation to his works, I will make way for my friend. September 1913, Ernest H. R. Collings.
Definitions. The words God, religions, faith, morals, woman, etc., they being forms of belief, are used as expressing different means as controlling and expressing desire. An idea of unity by fear in some form or another, which must spell bondage. The imagined limits, extended by science, which adds a dearly paid inch to our height. No more. Kia. The absolute freedom which, being free, is mighty enough to be reality, and free at any time. Therefore is not potential or manifest, except as its instant possibility by ideas of freedom or means, but by the ego being free to receive it, by being free of ideas about it, and by not believing. The less said of it, the less obscure is it. Remember, evolution teaches by terrible punishments. That conception is ultimate reality, but not ultimate freedom from evolution. Virtue. Pure art. Vice. Fear, belief, faith, control, science, and the like. Self-love. A mental state, mood, or condition caused by the emotion of laughter becoming the principle that allows the ego appreciation or universal association in permitting inclusion before conception. Exhaustion. That state of vacuity brought by exhausting a desire by some means of dissipation, when the mood corresponds to the nature of that desire, i.e., when the mind is worried because of the non-fulfillment of such desire, and seeks relief. By seizing this mood and living, the resultant vacuity is sensitive to the subtle suggestion of the sigil. Different religions and doctrines as means to pleasure, freedom, and power.
What is there to believe but in self? And self is the negation of completeness as reality. No man has seen self at any time. We are what we believe and what it implies by a process of time in the conception. Creation is caused by this bondage to formula. Actions are the expressions of ideas bound up in the belief. They being inherent are obscure, their operation indirect. Easily they deceive introspection. Fruits of action are twofold, heaven or hell, their unity or nothingness, purgatory or indifference. In heaven there is desire for women, hell the desire intense. Purgatory is expectation delayed, indifference but disappointment till recovery. Then verily they are one and the same. The wise pleasure-seeker, having realized they are different degrees of desire and never desirable, gives up both virtue and vice and becomes a chaost. Riding the shark of his desire, he crosses the ocean of the dual principle and engages himself in self-love. Religions are the projection of incapacity, the imaginations of fear, the veneer of superstition. That paradox is truth, while ofttimes the ornamentation of imbecility.
The full content is available on the website.